Ultimate Key to Happiness by Robert Scheinfeld, Chapter 7. Quieting the Noise. From my experience working with thousands of people around the world, when the mind machine observes that I've shared so far, it can boost and wear and come up with all sorts of objections, resistance, and arguments about why what I shared isn't true for you or anyone. It can also boast and wear and come up with an endless list of questions about what has been shared, even if it is accepted. I call that the mind machine activity, doubt, and endless questioning noise. In this chapter, I would like to discuss the typical forms of noise the mind machine tends to generate as truth virus is introduced and begins doing its work. I'll do that by sharing a list of common questions I'm asked when sharing this material and my answers. I could write an entire book on just questions and answers, but I'll be brief and to the point in this chapter. The following questions and answers may or may not have crossed your mind, but they represent the questions I'm asked most frequently. Whether they cross your mind or not, the answer should be supportive to your journey and to the truth virus doing its work. You may notice that some of the answers contain repetitive content. It's therefore possible you'll hear the mind machine say something like, yeah, I know that, Robert. You've said that a million times. Whether you hear the mind machine tell you the story or not, the repetition is very supportive to turbocharging the effectiveness of the truth virus. That's my cat. Isn't it a bit arrogant for you to say that only you know the truth, that everyone else is wrong, and only you are right about emotions and happiness? Everything I share is simply a narrative of what I've seen appear in inner space and story space, and what I've experienced in my own life. Through this book, you are invited to look and see if you observe the same things in your own personal experience. Arrogance is about having an exaggerated sense of one's own personal importance. None of this is about me personally, it's about you and the truth and true happiness. Question: when experiencing something that is not true happiness, what's the fastest way you found to shift back to true happiness quickly? When you ask that question, what you're saying is, I'm feeling something I don't like. That's the fastest way to change it to something I do like. That reinforces the lie, illusion, and story that there are positive emotions that feel good and negative emotions that feel bad. That we can only should do something to get out of the negatives and into the positives. For the reason I've shared, that path doesn't lead to true happiness. And I cannot therefore give you a fastest way as you request. If you look deeply into inner space and see that's really happening, what has always been happening, your question will dissolve. If you look deeply into inner space and see what's really happening, what has always been happening, your question will dissolve. I must also share, even though it's a bit off topic, that there is a gigantic myth in the world that says faster is always better. Faster is not always better. The best timing for you as a unique individual is always what's better if you want to use the word, whether it appears to be fast, slow, or in between. What are the tricks to sustain a happy state of mind when there isn't enough money in the bank to cover our most basic life expenses? True happiness is not conditional upon specific things appearing in story space, nor is it context sensitive. It can be your consistent experience no matter what's going around you. There is not one way to be truly happy when you have money challenges, other way to be truly happy with relationship challenges, another way to be truly happy if you're struggling with an illness. There's just true happiness no matter the context. The only trick in any context and with any challenge is to allow the truth virus to complete its work while looking deeply into inner space and First, seeing what's really going on. Second, seeing the pure raw experience separate from the mind machine story. Third, rest in the pure raw experience. Question: how do I sustain my sense of humor and joy when the mind machine is telling me painful stories? Answer: the opportunity here is not to do something to modify what's happening in inner space, in this case, to sustain your sense of humor and joy when something else is going on. The opportunity is to allow the truth virus to do enough of its work that you can observe what's happening in inner space and see what's really happening. When you're able to do that, the painful stories will dissolve and you'll experience true happiness. What you will say includes humor and joy, although you no longer call it those names. Question. Question. What about people who take Prozac or other mood-altering drugs? Don't they feel better after taking the drugs? This is actually quite a fascinating question. Before I answer it, I'm most sure that it's likely people who are taking mood-altering drugs, perhaps even you, if that's why you're asked the question, will argue to the death that I'm wrong about this. But truth is truth when it's seen, and it can be seen even in this context. For simplicity's sake, let's say someone has struggled with plasma taking a drug to alleviate the symptoms. Here's what happens. First, the mind machine learned to call a specific movement and frequency of energy in inner space depression. Second, the mind machine made up a story that depression is a feel-bad appearance it wants to get rid of. Third, the drug is taken and a different movement of energy and frequency appears in inner space. Fourth, the mind machine observes the new movement and frequency and makes up the story and makes up a story that it feels good appearance. The person who feels depressed accepts the story and believes they now feel better. Fifth, but that's not true. The old feeling called depression wasn't bad except in a story, and the new drug feeling isn't good or better except in a story. When we're mesmerized by stories the mind machine tells us, it seems so obvious. But certainly energy, movements, and frequency feel good and others feel bad. But it's just not true. All appearances are just different movements of energy and frequency, appearance in inner space, not good, not bad, not pleasant or painful. I realize how difficult this can be to see and accept, especially if you've struggled with many feel bad emotions over long periods of time. But it's the truth nevertheless. Just because a story appears and seems correct doesn't mean it is correct. As I share the stories, I just learn mechanical responses, no different than if you type depression into Google and got a bunch of search results saying depression is a bad feeling. Key point: you don't need to take my word for any of this. It doesn't matter if you agree, disagree, understand, or don't understand. You can experience this for yourself once the truth virus completes its work. Question: I am a parent of 2 children. My best friend is a parent of 3 children, and one of her children had just died. She is in a deep depression and filled with grief. Are you seriously telling me that one of my children died, I'll be happy about it? Answer: in a situation like this, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to really hear what I have to say here. Not right now, anyway. The lies, illusions, and stories in the mind machine database are too strong and locked in. But I will share the truth about this anyway, and what it sets into motion. It sets into motion. Grief and depressions are names used to describe specific movements and frequencies of energy appearing in inner space. The mind machine has bounded a story to the movement and frequency that says feels really bad. It's true that something higher or on the intensity scale is generally appearing in inner space when someone says they are depressed or feeling grief. But the story that it feels bad is simply not true. When the story separates from the pure, raw experience, it doesn't feel bad at all. Quite the contrary. Truth be told, once someone begins experiencing the true happiness, it's impossible to predict what will appear in inner space in response to what happens in story space. If a child of yours were to die, it's likely that a very intense movement and frequency of energy will appear in inner space. But it can appear and it can be experienced as pure raw experience as the pure raw experience it truly is, without the feel-bad story. And overall emotional experience can be very different. I'm not saying you'll be happy or glad in the traditional sense if a child died. Of course not. But I'm saying that if you were experiencing true happiness at the time, you will simply be aware of a movement and frequency of energy in inner space without names, labels, or feel-bad judgments. I say this as a parent of 2 children myself. I say this after having many challenging experiences with my kids while experiences true happiness that will ordinarily stimulate bad feelings in the lie, illusion, story way of looking at things. I also say this after experiencing the death of my father. Until the truth virus completes a certain amount of his work, there is no way the mind machine, and therefore you, will accept that I just share at the idea and concept level, especially with such an intense experience as the death of a child. The mind machine will just buzz and whirl and come back with lies, illusions, and stories like that doesn't make sense, or I don't agree, or that couldn't be, or that will be a cold and heartless response, or I'll be a terrible person if I responded it that way. This is something that can and must be experienced, and is not cold and heartless at all. It's the truth. Cold and heartless and terrible person are just mind machine stories. I expect this answer to be considered controversial, but by many who read it, and allow it to swirl at the idea and concept level only. I have problems with my health that cause me a lot of discomfort, and the primary cause of my depression, because they seem to be endless. What would you advise in this situation? From my perspective, using the language and perspective I've shared here, this is what you're really saying. There's a persistent illness accompanied by physical discomfort. The mind machine observes it and makes it up a story about it being endless and the negative implications of that. The movement of energy in inner space begins to move and vibrate at a specific frequency in response to the story about endless discomfort. The mind machine observes that movement and frequency of emotional energy, buzzes and whirls, and tells your story that it is depression and it is uncomfortable and bad, without the involvement of the mind machine, which is what happens when true happiness is being experienced. It's what will happen instead. There's a persistent illness accompanied by physical discomfort. The movement of energy of inner space begins to move and vibrate at a specific frequency in response to the illness and discomfort. The movement and frequency of the emotion energy is simply experience, with no name, label, or judgment, not good, not bad, not pleasurable, not painful, just the movement and frequency of energy appearing in inner space. I must also share that as difficult as it might be for you to believe, it is also possible for the truth virus to have so much impact in the mind machine that it wouldn't be experiencing physical pain from the illness anymore. I discuss this possibility in the final chapter of the book called The Red Pill. Like my answer to the question above, the death of a child is likely the mind machine will observe this answer, buzz, whirl, and kick out thoughts like, there's no way I could ever be okay with endless pain, or bullshit, I really am depressed about this, or no, it really, really hurts. It's excruciating. If thoughts like that do appear, I get it. I hear you. I've been there on my own way. I bought the t-shirt, he says as well. All I can say is that when you actually experience true happiness, you'll see that I'm telling the truth. As I stated, this is literally mind-blowing stuff. Question. I will be interested to know what your point of view is on people who say they are not aware of their emotions or don't feel them. While working with thousands of people worldwide, I hear this from time to time when I poke at it, when I explore it. What I see is that it's generally not true. There can be exceptions, of course, but I'm just talking about what I've seen from my experience when people say that they don't experience emotions, really do experience emotions, lost of them. They may appear to be muffled or hidden from view, but they are there. There's just a mind machine story running that says they are not being felt. Why would the mind machine tell a story like that? Because for some people emotions are perceived as uncomfortable and scary. As you now know, emotions aren't really uncomfortable or scary except in a story. But it's a very compelling story for many people. From my experience, energy moves in specific ways and it's tuned to specific frequencies. In all of us, whether the mind machine kicks out a story saying it isn't happening or is barely noticeable. Question. For about 90% of my life, I'm emotionally neutral, and when emotional peaks appear, what I do is to look for meaning, and I'm assigning the event. Then see that I'm creating the meaning in my mind, and that it solves the emotion. As a purely mental exercise, I find this beneficial for my personal growth. How do you feel about that? When it comes to experiencing true happiness, we are not talking about dissolving emotions or doing anything to them. That's the old game, the old path, and ultimately leads nowhere. When it comes to experiencing true happiness, we're talking about experiencing emotions, all of them, without names, labels, or judgmental stories. To me, that's true personal growth. I'm not saying there's no value to purely mental exercises. I'm not saying don't do them. They can be very helpful and supportive at certain stages of your journey. And I'm saying is that purely mental exercise is designed to manage, minimize, muffle, reframe, ignore, release, dissolve, destroy, transmute, heal core causes, or eliminate negative emotions will not lead to experience true happiness. Purely mental exercises like that will keep you on the hamster wheel and forever chasing rabbits you'll never catch. Question. Is the experience of true happiness you describe, in essence, learning to detach from emotions and observe the ego? No, that's not what I'm saying. It's true that we have invited you to observe what's appearing in inner space, and someone could say that I'm calling the mind machine is the same thing as what others call ego. But there's a big difference between observing what's appearing in inner space and operating of the mind machine in the way I'm describing it and detaching from it. Detachment, in its simplest form, means to be separated or disconnected from, which, in this context, will be another attempt to manage, minimize, muffle, reframe, ignore, release, dissolve, destroy, transmute, heal core causes, or eliminate negative emotions. True happiness is the extreme opposite of detachment. When experiencing true happiness, you're fully immersed in and connected to the movements and frequencies of energy in inner space. But the full immersion and connection is to the pure raw experience, not the story. Does meditation help to achieve the state of true happiness? Answer. Many people would disagree with me on this, but my answer is not usually. From what I've seen, experienced myself, and been told by others who are brutally honest about their experiences, meditation is not a path that leads to true happiness as it is defined here. I'm speaking very, very generally, but what usually happens with meditation is that while someone is in meditative state, the mind machine disengages, doesn't buzz and whirl, and inner space appears devoid of the movement of emotional energy, or there's an appearance the mind machine labels as peaceful or serene and good. As soon as someone exits the meditative states and returns to waking consciousness, however, the mind machine re-engages, and they experience the illusion of positive and negative emotions again. Rarely does the cumulative effect of meditating for a long period of time do anything to change how the mind machine operates. There can always be exceptions, of course. What's the hardest part about changing your beliefs so you can experience true happiness? Answer. I realize that the idea, concept, and technique of changing beliefs is common in self-help and psychological models. However, that's not what I'm talking about here. Let me explain. To do that, let me share another metaphor, the metaphor of the sun and the clouds. Imagine that the sun represents true happiness. Imagine that the lies, illusions, and stories in the mind machine represent a solid, dense layer of cloud a dense layer of cloud cover that blocks from experiencing the sun of true happiness. Changing belief will mean change the content of the cloud cover. If you change what's in the cloud cover, no matter how positive or empowering it might be, there's still cloud cover in place that blocks the experience of the sun. I'm talking about knocking out the cloud cover completely so the sun of true happiness can shine in. It might seem like a subtle difference, but it's actually a huge difference. Question. How do I know I'm on the right track if I don't use feelings or emotions reaction as a radar anymore? You're actually talking about two different things here. When I speak of true happiness, I'm speaking about experiencing pure emotional energy without a mind machine story bonded to it. When you say you use feelings as a radar, you're talking about an appearance in inner space that has information attached to it that you might call an intuitive message or a hunch or an inner guidance. That message or inner guidance may appear to have a feeling attached to it, but it's the message or guidance that matters most. That's a different experience than true happiness. An intuitive message or hunch or inner guidance, whether a feeling appears attached to it or not, is a story kicked out by the post world of the mind machine, as I've defined it. It is something different, and it doesn't stop when the true happiness is being experienced. Intuitive messages will still come through, possibly attached to movements and frequencies of energy in inner space, possibly on their own. Nothing is lost along the lines when you start experiencing true happiness. Question. Our small prayer group has been spending a lot of time addressing and eliminating blocks and repeating patterns. How does true happiness address blocks and patterns like that? In a sense, the truth virus, as we discussed it here, eliminates blocks and patterns as part of its function. The question here is, what sort of blocks and patterns are we speaking of? What your prayer group has been doing might be different, but in general, when people talk about eliminating blocks and lifetime patterns, they are talking about patterns like self-sabotage, struggling with money, repeating painful relationship dynamics, ups and downs in career, etc. In general, working to eliminate blocks and patterns like that does not lead to the experience of true happiness. To experience true happiness, the mind machine must be disengaged from hijacking and telling stories about pure, raw emotional experience. That's generally very different from working to eliminate specific patterns and blocks. Question. Can you say more about how experiencing true happiness can also affect my relationship, my money, my body, my health, etc.? Answer. I could probably talk 2 weeks about this, but I must be brief and general here. All day, every day, you're focused on trying to change, fix, improve, create, or experience specific things in your life. Happiness is the ultimate motivation behind all those attempts to change, fix, improve, create, or experience those specific things. Therefore, every time you try to change, fix, improve, create, or experience something in your life, you're really trying to be happy. You think, if I can just X, I'll be happy. So you work hard to achieve X. Well, if you're already happy, true happy, all the time, no matter what happens, what do you think happens to your list of things you want to change, fix, improve, create, or experience? It'll change, right? It will shrink, right? You might not believe it right now, meaning the mind machine buses and wheels and kick thoughts like this into inner space. I'm not sure about that, or I disagree with that. But all you see for yourself once you begin experiencing true happiness. That's what happens. The list shrinks. Many wants and desires that were on the list simply drop off, and the ones that remain on the list are perceived very differently. When you're truly happy all the time, the list shrinks, and the way we perceive the things that remain on your list, and whether you get them or not, changes. It forms big drops in your pond that ripple up into every aspect of your life, including relationships, money, business, and career, even body and health. The impact of those ripples isn't something that you can undergo, figure out, get a sneak preview of, or project into advance. It's beyond words, ideas, and concepts. It must be experienced. I need to make sure we are clear on something else at this point. When the true happiness drops start rippling out in your pound, it doesn't mean you're going to suddenly become a millionaire, find your soulmate, and instantly fix a relationship that's been broken for years. It doesn't mean a persistent health or body problem is suddenly going to heal overnight. It doesn't mean whatever fantasy you have of what you love to see appear or disappear in your life is going to suddenly appear or disappear in your life. Someone or all the examples I just shared could happen, but that's not what I mean about true happiness, waves rippling out through every aspect of your life. There's no specific kind of transformation, detail, or change in story space as guaranteed. When true happiness appears in inner space, the details can be over the map. Wow, depending on the unique story you're staring at. There's no one way it looks. There's actually an infinite number of possibilities. I feel it's best for you to be surprised and delighted, so to speak, when you actually experience true happiness ripples yourself. Actually, that's what I want. I don't want lists. I don't want to have a map. I don't want to know. I just want to be truly amazed and have fun with it. Since I started, like, I'm gonna do a parenthesis here. Since I started all this development stuff and everything, and that you actually need to create your reality and like make it happen, everything, and structure it, that doesn't appeal to me at all. I mean, I've tried it, and it's just not what I want. I want to be surprised. I want to be amazed, and just have fun. That's what life's supposed to be, isn't it? Such a dark game as well. Anyway, it's an extraordinary and, I've said, literally mind-blowing experience. That would be so cool to have. An extraordinary, mind-blowing experience, which is cool and full of beautiful feelings. What about love? Answer. Wow, I could write an entire book on this topic alone. I'm going to answer this question fully, but I must warn you to be prepared for a controversial answer that many mind machines won't appear to like. The word love is used in so many different contexts and means many different things in different contexts. For purposes of discussions here, there are three primary contexts and meanings for the word love. First, a word used to describe your opinion about preferences of something without a movement of frequency of energy appearing in space. For example, I love carrot cake. Second, a word used to describe a movement of frequency of energy that appears in inner space related to another person or living being. For example, I love my mother, I love my dog. Third, a word used to describe spiritual dynamics. For example, God is love. For our purposes here, I'm only going to discuss option 2. When love is used to describe a movement or frequency of energy that appears in inner space related to another person or living being. At this point on our journey together, it might or might not surprise you to hear that when we use the word love with reference to a person or living being, it's really no different than using any word to describe any other movement or frequency of energy appearing in inner space. Love is used to describe an unique set of movements and frequencies in inner space that tend to be very strong and intense. I said set of movements because what we call love isn't one thing. It can usually take various shapes and forms and still be called love. In this sense, there's nothing truly special about love in this context except in a mind-machine story. Like all other emotional movements and frequencies, the mind machine simply observes specific movements and frequencies in inner space, learn to name them love, and bond in a highly possibly story to them. In those specific movements and frequencies appear in inner space, you become aware of them. You say, I love you. Patricio! If they don't appear, you don't use the word love. It's that simple, truth be told. In some cases, which happens a lot in romantic relationships, when those movements and frequencies once appear but don't any longer, we say we don't love you anymore. Or I don't love you anymore. Don't take my word for this. Look for yourself and see what's happening in inner space when you find yourself saying or feeling that you love someone. Key point. This is in no way meant to minimize or demean love or loving. It's just an observation of the truth of what you see if you examine that specific appearance with brutal honesty. Key point. Love doesn't go when true happiness waves begins to ripple out. But what you call love can change and expand when true happiness waves begin to ripple out. And a lot of what you will have once called pain and confusion related to love or loving, including when it isn't reciprocated by someone else, will drop away. When true happiness waves begin to ripple out, you will mostly likely to tell people and pets you love them when the love movements and frequencies appear. I do all the time, but the opportunity presented by true happiness is for you to be crystal clear on what you're really saying and what's really happening when you say or think I love you. For the love frequency to appear more often than it does now, for the love frequency to no longer to be limited to appearing only with specific people or living beings at specific times, for the love frequency to no longer appear and disappear with the same person or living beings as their appearances in story space change, as the mind machine stories about those appearances change over time. Question. What about emotions in dreams? Is the mind machine still active there? Dream space, as I call it, is a very unique place. There are no rules or formulas about what happens there or what can happen there. The best way to look at it is simply this. Anytime you experience emotions in dream space that have positive, negative, pleasurable, painful story bonded to them, mind machine is involved. Question. What about deep sleep then, when everything seems to go black? When you experience what's called deep sleep, which means total blackout, nothing is appearing in inner space or story space at all. So there's no movement of frequency of energy in inner space and the mind machine isn't active. Question. You create a very compelling case for positive and negative emotions not being real. However, when I look into inner space, it seems like some emotions feel good and some feel bad. What do you suggest? Answer. When you look into the inner space, it will continue to appear as if there are positive and negative emotions until the truth values have been introduced and completed a certain amount of work. That's just the way it is because the mind machine stories are so entrenched and mesmerizing. However, once the truth virus has been introduced and progressed to a certain point, our perceptions will begin to change. Then change more, then transformation into an experience of true happiness. I really hope he's telling the truth here, you know? How long do I need to watch and wait for the pure raw experience in the story to separate and to experience true happiness? There's no way to predict this. If we were to track the lives of 1,000 people, who embrace what's being shared here, and monitor how long it took to move through the truth virus stages I'll be describing, we'll see all sorts of manifestations. You are here as a unique individual experiencing the unfolding of a unique experience you call life. The only thing I can promise is that if experience of true happiness is part of your story, it will happen at the best time for you in the best way. That's Ho'oponopono in a way. Ho'oponopono says something like that. You actually just have to trust and enjoy the ride. How do I know if the truth virus is working? You might not know it's working in the early stages. You might even think nothing is happening. But if the truth virus has been introduced and is allowed to do its work, the day will come when you will know it's working beyond the shadow of any doubt. Why? Because your perception and experience of what's happening in inner space will change radically. That concludes this batch of questions and answers. Once the truth virus has been introduced into the mind machine and has some time to make changes, you will begin to see things changing in inner space, but you will perceive it as a work in progress for a while. There's a gap separating where you are now from actually experiencing true happiness on a consistent basis. That gap must be bridged, and the bridge is built in several stages. To discover what the stages are and what to expect, you move through them. Turn to the next page.